2, 1. I'm excited to do this one.
I'm super excited.
See how look, I'm all about holding it. I'm gonna bring up the clap every single time we do this episode. We do another episode. We do another episode. You're not happy with the clap. We spoke about it previously. Resha, do you like the clap?
No comments.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. Not very convincing.
I don't know what else to expect other than the clap.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
We're really excited to have you on. How do you?
Absolutely.
Get our mental state in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're looking for. So before, just to kick it off as a starting point, psychiatry or psychology? You're a psychiatrist or a psychologist?
I am a mental health counselor, aka psychologist.
So you don't prescribe drugs?
No, that's
Damn it.
psychiatry.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry to disappoint.
Okay. But essentially, in terms of the activities that you do, it's the same.
Very similar. There is, though, a difference between a psychologist and a counselor therapist. I could talk about that later if you want.
You can talk about it whenever you want.
Oh, okay.
Whenever you're free.
So basically, I mean, we do the same amount of work the same style of work. We do therapy
Mhm.
or talk sessions. However, a psychologist undergoes a more intensive training, which means they either have a PhD or a doctorate in psychology,
Okay.
where a counselor is a counselor after they finish their master's and does their training. So the hours of training are less, but really do the same thing.
So in terms of your educational profile or the background it's pretty much you guys are reading the same theories, the same studies, and the same kind of background?
More or less, yes. The background is similar, more or less. Of course, for every training school or every training program, there's differences in the curriculum. You can imagine where you do it in the US or Canada, UK. Some schools are more they're more leaning towards certain therapies and theories, and therefore they focus on that. I'm a generalist myself,
Okay.
and I'm a couples therapist as well. So I don't describe myself as like a CBT therapist because I don't have a specialization
Right.
in that. So I kind of pick and borrow and choose what to use with the client based on the presenting issues and based on their complaints.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You ever done therapy?
No, but it's something I've
I've-
always thought of doing.
I've done it. I've done it a couple of times.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. But then I never continued.
I'm just curious, what did you enjoy about it?
As you can tell, I enjoy speaking, right? It gives me a platform,
Perfect.
an excuse
Focus
to
on
talk
you.
more. Me?
Let me tell you.
Oh, you want to know about me?
I'll
Okay,
tell you.
All right, I can do this. I'm like, yeah, no. I think addressing some of those underlining thoughts,
Mhm.
I think is quite important.
Mhm.
I'm really recently, Laith knows, we've been on this trip recently. Laith has been doing it more often than me, but me recently over the last, say, 3 weeks or so,
Mhm.
been doing this whole 5 a.m. wake up. I go
Wow.
for a jog, and then when I come back, between 5:30 till about 6:15, I sit, watch the sunrise, and I do like a mindful.
Wow.
Yeah, so I
That's
sit,
quite dedicated.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
gratitude. I try to think through gratitude. Then I obviously try to clear my mind, focus on my breathing,
Wonderful.
and then just try to see how I want to approach the day. So I'm trying to be conscious about that,
Mhm.
and it is something that I've cared about. But it's so challenging. Like it's in the moment, it's much more difficult. Like I can prep myself mentally and say, okay, I want to behave in X way.
Mm.
I want to be controlled. Even if someone upsets me, I don't want to,
Yeah.
and then once that moment comes and then you find yourself and I think that's
Right. That's a lot more difficult, right?
absolutely.
But I'm really actually quite surprised, but pleasantly surprised that you do some of this already, like the mindfulness, the gratitude. I mean, these are basic skills that we teach, and I wasn't aware that, this is common knowledge for at least the local population from what I see. Maybe the local population is quite skewed, actually.
No, I wouldn't want to say we don't represent the main demographic, but I don't think we do
No,
represent.
I don't think so, to be
No.
honest. No.
Because
No.
keeping in mind that one of our guests was Dr. Dan Tomasulo, who's one of like the leading mindful kind of authors, psychologists. He's based out. He's a professor at Columbia University. He's written a few books. He's like an authority, and we had him on. So obviously I read his books. He was just phenomenal, like really, really intriguing individual.
So then you know probably a lot more than I do on mindfulness from his knowledge. You can pass it on.
Something interesting about therapy is like growing up, there's a stigma around therapy. People think like, oh, if you need a therapist, there's something wrong with you, especially in this region.
Yeah.
And I think more and more people are starting to realize that no, it's just like anything else. It's just like physical activity. You need some type of mental check.
Yeah.
Is that the right way to describe it?
That's a good way to describe it. The way I describe it is similar to what you just said. I say, once a year, at least in Canada, that's what we did once a year. We go for a physical checkup, right? So there's nothing wrong with doing a mental health checkup. And the way I explain it to clients that are a little bit hesitant or ambivalent about pursuing therapy, because you have to buy them in, right? If they're not convinced, they're not going to stay. So what I try to focus on, other than, of course, building the rapport and the therapeutic relationship, when they become able to trust you as a therapist, then they respect you and they like you, then they want to be able to have that one-on-one focus time with you. But the way I describe it is, think about it as, in our cultures, in collectivist cultures, this is not a new thing. Storytelling, talking about our experiences, sharing, connection. This is things we've been doing for centuries. Our ancestors were doing it. We just never called it therapy. Now, then it became a science at some point, and it was studied, and then it was verified. Then there was therapeutic techniques that were proven to be helpful for certain disorders. And as the science grew, then it became what it is, as we see it today. But healers, we see ourselves as healers as well, has been a very old type of job, but wasn't officially a paid job. It was, the wise old person that you go to for advice, or, back in the day in the towns, maybe you would seek the advice of the patriarch or the matriarch or something like that. So I think the origins come from there, that it's evolved definitely into an official profession in science, but it's certainly not new. And so I normalize it when I talk about it in this way, but I kind of pose it to the local population. And I mean the local Emirati population, because usually there's a lot more resistance when it comes to therapy from them rather than the expats, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I say, who did you go to when you were younger, when you were confused? Who did you talk to? Usually it's a grandmother, it's a great aunt, it's, the father's best friend or something, like an older figure. And then I kind of explain it in that way. But what we do is we've studied how the mind works, how emotions play a role in our lives, how thoughts, like you talked about, unhelpful ways of thinking, like being aware of your thinking. We often are not aware of our thinking. And then how do you utilize that to your best interest? How does it make you who you are? And how do you utilize all of that to serve you well?
I mean, I think one of the problems with people going and taking that decision to go see someone is there's a stigma around the idea that you must be broken if you're gonna go see someone. How, like, from your take, I would assume that you're gonna say that most people could benefit from it, whether you are facing challenges or whether you feel as though you have a good control or a good understanding of yourself. But how would you, what would you say to that impression that, listen, I'm fine. I'm a stable individual. I don't need to see someone professionally to talk about how I feel or what. What would you say to that?
I think that's a very important topic, because traditionally, that's how it was. Traditionally, in the 50s and the 60s, up until actually the 2000s, whoever really sought therapy was someone who had a problem. I had a problem with my emotions, with my family, with my thinking. I had a severe problem, like a major depression or anxiety disorder. That's when I sought therapy. More and more, as times are changing, and globally, I think there's a movement towards adopting a better lifestyle and mental health and whatnot. And coaching now is demystifying the work that we do as well. Coaching is not psychology, by the way, just to make a distinction, but it's positive lifestyle approach. What's happening is now it's becoming more normal to have a coach or a lifestyle coach, or to have a shrink, or psychologist or someone, a therapist that you talk to. You're hearing it more able to be part of the common culture now. But of course, it's still, in some places, in some countries, it's still more stigmatized than other countries. I imagine in the Middle East, it's still more stigmatized, even than like Canada, whatever. I used to work in Kuwait, and in Kuwait, it's more stigmatized than it is here, just because of the makeup of the population.
So the majority are they expats, or are you seeing a lot of locals as well?
I have to be honest. I think the majority expats, but more and more, like over the last, I've been here 5 years working in the field in Dubai. Before that, I was in Kuwait for 4. I see a lot more locals, say this year, even 2020 is an exceptional year for everyone, than I've ever seen in my years of work, 10 years of work. So this idea of being broken is changing. We don't have to be broken. We could just seek answers. We could just seek growth, seek, a better version of ourselves, optimizing ourselves. And sometimes that's what we talk about in therapy. It's not necessarily deep-rooted problems if there aren't any. It's just like, one of my favorite sessions or clients actually is about existential issues like that. What gives you meaning? What gives you purpose? Why are you here? What are you doing?
Yeah, it's almost like these high-performing individuals or high-performing athletes, whether you're successful or, at work or in your career, you'll still need some sort of, I wouldn't call it therapy. I don't know if therapy is the right word that explains it. I think it's beyond that. It's more like almost like when you take a car for a checkup.
Yeah.
You're just making sure that everything's in the right path, everything's working correctly.
Right.
Am I focused on the right things? What's trying to help the person understand what's most important to them and how they can be better in their day-to-day life, whether it's personal life, whether it's work life, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm going to put something out there. You brought it up and you said it about the coaches. I think life coaches are full of shit. I'll be honest. Because I've met a few of these coaches.
Yeah.
Man, look, if with all due respect to the coaches out there, and I hope, if you guys see an episode and you have a great coach that you'd recommend, I'd love to sit down and talk to them.
I'd love to give you a few good names.
Really?
Yeah.
But not my problem. I won't position this in a better way. I'm going to be very politically correct here. It's just challenging for me to have someone saying that they're going to be my guide. And they're not an expert, or they're not someone that's studied. So for example, a psychiatrist or psychologist, I can appreciate you have the educational background, the training, it's there. So I get it.
The supervision as well.
And the supervision, absolutely.
There's accountability.
Right? The life coach thing is like, I've decided to become a coach and we know.
Yeah.
Right? And
100%.
And it's like, who are you? A lot of people I've met, like they don't even have their life in order, let alone to be positioning themselves as a life coach.
Yeah. So I used to think that way as well until I met a few really good life coaches, and my view has changed. So yes, it has become more recently a fad, unfortunately. Anybody that takes a 6-month course, or not even like a year course, calls them lifestyle coach or, executive coach or whatever it may be. It's more, it's less stigmatized to have a coach than to have a psychologist or a therapist. I think that's the pull they have. But on the other hand, I don't think I'm wrong on this. It's not a regulated discipline. Psychology, almost everywhere, is a regulated discipline. To be able to work in a clinic in Dubai, I have to be foreseen by a body. Currently, I'm licensed by CDA, Community Development Authority, as a counselor, or else I wouldn't be able to provide my services. But anyone can open shop and call themselves a coach. Having said that, I know, for example, like what comes to mind, 2 great coaches. I won't shout it out to them, but they know who they are because I often refer to them when it's like executive coaching, team building activities, workshops. They're educated. They've actually done the real work, the real certifications and the real courses, the trainings by specific institutions or schools that actually offer a good type of training. So it's kind of like a shortcut to what we do without the psychological aspect of it. And there's limitations to how much they can do. They don't work with background stuff or like what we call family of origin stuff or trauma. They're not qualified to do that. Mm-hmm. And, an ethical coach, just like an ethical psychologist or therapist, would work within those boundaries. So I've had referrals from a few coaches because, this is out of scope. They've done their work. Short term, by the way, coaching is very short term. Here we go, Resha, he has some self-esteem issues or he has some depression that kind of popped up and it was uncovered, and that's what we work with. But unfortunately, there's a big portion, and the majority are how you describe them to be.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the person themselves.
Yes.
Like, for example, I'll give you a personal example. Waking up early in the morning, going to the gym, in my mind is like, okay, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. This is what makes me happy. I'm programmed to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm up at 6 a.m., put on my gym shoes, put on my gym clothes, walk to the gym. I'm just like dragging my feet to do it. I don't need a therapist for this, and I don't need a life coach. But what I would do is I'd put on YouTube and I'd find motivational workout speeches. Mm-hmm. It's a 10-minute thing where I hear some guy talking.
Right.
And I'm in it.
Yeah. Pops you up.
I'm all about the motivational things on YouTube, man. I love those.
So if you tell me a life coach that comes and knows their lane, they stay in their lane and that's what they're doing. Yeah. Shout out to stay in your lane.
Yeah.
I'm all for it. But I think like you said, is that knowing where their job stops and hand it over to somebody where it becomes more serious and it's more, you need to study for this kind of advice.
For sure. And that you bring up a very good point because coaches are not counselors. Counselors can be coaches.
Yeah.
I do a lot of coaching in some of my sessions because, that's what they want to work on. They want to come in for 6 sessions or it's short term because it's, let's say, through insurance or whatever it may be. So we know we have an allocated amount of time to work on these specific short-term goals. So that's coaching. Therapy is different than counseling. Therapy is different than coaching. Therapy is long-term. We kind of go back towards where all those stuff originated and we make connections and we give insight and feedback and discoveries. And it's a lot more soul-searching. Mm-hmm. It's harder work than coaching in that way, in the psychological aspect of it. But regarding coaching, I find that they're actually beat psychologists in many ways. I'm trying to be very fair to both sides. Coaches
being gentle,
usually are extroverts. Extrovert, they love, the crowd, and they do a lot of what you guys say, motivational speaking, pumping you up. They use positive psychology, which is part of, a big field in psychology that we use as well. Mm-hmm. And they do, executive work and leadership work. And the two coaches that I say that I often, I respect and refer to if I need to are people that do this type of line of work,
Okay.
So
I hope, you keep an open mind, but it's definitely personality.
No to the coaches. Sorry, guys. Not for me.
So how would you advise somebody that's never done therapy or is kind of discouraged by the whole concept of how do you go about picking the right therapist or finding the right psychologist?
That's a good question. So I'll ask you that question, maybe not you. How do you pick where to go to the barber to cut your hair?
Oh, that's a very tough question.
I'll ask you that question.
That's a very tough question. It's funny you say that.
Okay.
Because I've sorry for the use of the word, but I'm a barber whore.
Okay.
I don't stick to one barber. Why? Because I'll go to a barber, they'll cut my hair fine, but they'll talk my ear off. And I'm like, I'm here just to get a haircut, just in and out, 20 minutes, don't. So I'll go to the next barber.
You didn't know that they're therapists?
Well, it's funny you say that because earlier when you were talking about the matriarch, barbers were that. They did offer that type of service.
Yeah.
But to pick a barber, it's clean, kind of busy, but not so busy that I can go in and out.
Right.
Comfortable.
Good.
Maybe a good referral.
Somebody might refer me,
Yeah.
Although nobody's ever referred me to a good barber.
Maybe you don't know the right people.
Maybe. Or all my friends are bald.
I want to point out.
But yeah, so how do you do it?
You just named a few good things. Reputable.
Yeah.
experienced, word of mouth, right? Like
Yeah, but with the bar,
comfortable, you have to have a comfort level. So they don't want to talk your ear off, but give you the good service. Same thing. Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's the same comfort level.
right?
And I say this to often my clients, especially my male clients, and that's why I asked you that. And they usually give me similar answers to what you said. I'm like, well, you have to try. It's not a one size fit all. How do you know how good someone is at cutting your hair if you don't try it? So have a session with that person, but first check them out. So, I mean, the way I pick a therapist to refer a client, because I can't do all of the issues, obviously. There are, out of scope issues that I don't deal with. So what do? I look for the expertise. If they cover that area of work, how many years of experience? Are they reputable? Word of mouth. Do other people in my community, in my network know them and have good things to say about them? Then I refer the client to them.
Okay.
It's kind of like, the same. So you do a bit of research and you make sure that they're licensed and you make sure that they're legitimate. They're not operating out of, an office that they rent, which has become almost impossible here. It's possible.
Okay.
Yeah, it's impossible because here to operate, like I said, you need a license and the place that the office, the clinic has to be licensed. In Kuwait, for example, you can open anywhere and call it a clinic and you become a therapist with it because it's not regulated. There's no watch body that tells you where you're from.
Also, Kuwait is not regulated in that respect.
No, when I was there, it was mental health was under the Ministry of Commerce.
Are you joking?
Just recently, mental health moved to the Ministry of Health, where it belongs and it should be. But, I have high hopes in the Middle East that people will catch up and things will people definitely will wake up to these realities and things are progressing. But sometimes it just takes longer in some countries rather than others. In other countries too, I think Bahrain and Qatar, that it's not regulated as well. The same situation, which is not a good protection for us as professionals and not a good protection for the public, for the population. They don't know who they're talking to.
Yeah, I would imagine that would probably work against your profession, right? That when you have it unregulated, random people sitting there giving a bad name or a bad rep to it.
And not just that, damaging them, even more so damaging the individual because they're working out of their competency. I have some really sad stories that I've worked with in Kuwait and even here sometimes by people that were not fit to be a therapist, but called themselves a psychologist or a therapist, done tons of therapy for this person, probably screwed them up even more. And then we do the cleanup work.
Now, like as a therapist, I'm going to go deep with this one.
Okay.
And maybe it's a little personal. You don't necessarily need to answer, but you have to.
I'm open to vulnerability.
Okay, I like that. Do you feel that because you know all of this stuff that you're in super control of yourself and the way that you assess yourself? Are you able to have that same kind of perspective?
I think therapists see therapists.
Yes. For sure, we should, but not all do.
Yeah.
Again, I believe if it was, something that it should be mandated. For a helper to be a helper, it should be mandated part of the program. When I trained in Canada, it wasn't mandated. I put myself through therapy. I paid for it out of pocket because I think it's healthy. I think if you don't experience being a client, you won't be as good and efficient and effective of a therapist. You got to know how it feels to open up, to be vulnerable, to be, wounded and to heal from your drama and from your issues. Let's be honest. We all have dysfunctionalities in our families and backgrounds and traumas and things, that have affected the person we have become. In fact, I did my last paper thesis was on the phenomena of the wounded healer and how that is a calling more than just a job and a career. I believe we need to see, and the other thing, not just therapists, we need to have supervisors. And in Canada and in the US and in the UK, this is mandated. You have supervisor has to have a supervisor. Your supervisor has a supervisor of their own.
Wow.
And it's like that. Yeah.
And what you check in with the supervisor in what respect? Like, are you saying, okay, I seen this client, this is what they were saying?
So basically we're human beings, right? So you, let's say for an example, are my client, you say something that triggers me as an individual. I'm a human being, right? So something got triggered for me. We may have an experience of countertransference or transference that I don't know how to deal with. So it is on a personal but more professional level. So it's to keep yourself in check. If you're struggling with a client, if you're struggling not knowing what to do, you feel stuck. I've been there many times. I almost like, I don't know how else to help this client. I've tried everything I know, like every tool in the toolbox, but they still come back and I don't know what they're getting out of it. So I get frustrated as a helper, and that's going to show in the therapy if I don't deal with it, right?
Okay.
So it's towards the professional level, but also your identity so much becomes a therapist that automatically goes into the deeper level. So that's why I have a therapist and a supervisor, 2 separate things. But you said, I think you asked something about like, how
do you feel like you have perspective?
Yes.
Knowing what you know.
Yes. That's a good question. Yes, is the short answer. It's complicated is the real answer. Because when you become in the process of becoming a therapist, you discover so many things in your family and like about yourself, and that are shocking, and then that are exciting, and that are new, and they're also eye-opening, that it almost isolates you in a way mentally. To be honest, I'm lucky enough to have my older brother. Shout out to him. He's in Kuwait. He's a therapist too. And like that mind connection is completely different when you're talking to a therapist talking to a therapist. Like we get it, because you feel like it's kind of like an awakening, and you do a lot of soul searching and healing, and you work through a lot of difficult issues on your own that often your surroundings, your friends who are not therapists, not in the field, are not going through at the same time, or they are, but in a different way. So I feel like it's been a growth journey for me as an individual and as a therapist, and it's made me a better therapist at what I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
You thinking of doing it now?
Yeah. I think you should refer, if you have a referral, somebody.
For sure.
Go see Resha.
Or
she's
see
right here.
yeah.
There you go.
No, I wouldn't be able to see you.
Why would you? Why would you not be able to?
Personal connections?
Yeah. So that's another not so fun part about our work is, I can't be a therapist to my family. I can't be a therapist to my friends. I likely might be able to be a therapist to a friend of a friend that I don't know well. That's fine. But there's a duality that might happen. So, for friends, I can't counsel you in an unbiased way.
But is that sorry to interrupt, is that a therapist limitation
boundary.
or patient
It's
limitation?
a therapist limitation.
Okay.
All my, I shouldn't say all, that's narcissistic. Many of my clients wanted to be my friends after they ended therapy. I can't. There's a power differential. There's a hierarchy. It's unethical. Mm-hmm. They will always look up to you as that person that helped them. And many of them are awesome, wonderful people in real life. I'd love to be their friends, But when I walk through the mall and I see them, I have to pretend like I don't know them for their own confidentiality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That type.
That's why I think therapy is better to have a therapist than to speak, like you were saying earlier, to a grandparent or to somebody that you know, because there's that, I don't know if it's the right word, like non-judgmental.
Right.
You're looking through the problem rather than just the person.
From the outside, So
and you're not vested. I think that's a big part of it. You're not vested in the situation and the person.
Exactly. Right? And that's why, like, if I know you and I want to give you advice, I'm not going to be able to give you the most sound advice or suggestions because I care about you in an emotional way, right? Mm-hmm. So then it's harder. So for me, as a neutral party to this couple that's coming in, or even to an individual, I can see the full picture and I can lay it all out, right? Without worrying about hurting their feelings, or, we are gentle in the way we do things. And by the way, we don't tell you what to do. Yeah. We help you reach to where you want to get and figure it out on your own. I kind of describe my role in therapy as a mediator or a guide or a mentor, but I kind of help guide them through the path that they want to work through without telling them necessarily what to do. But I may suggest things. The way I do therapy is semi-structured. It's more proactive. Not the person that just sits there and listens. I remember a friend said, "Oh, I don't want to go to therapy. They're so expensive, and you just pay them to listen." I'm like, "Which therapist are you going to?" Like, I do a lot more than that. I work much harder than that. So different modalities, different, client-centered therapists usually do a lot more listening. Humanistic therapists or Gestalt are more active. We do exercises. It's very
Gestalt. That's an interesting.
It's a different type of, but for an example, Gestalt has this empty chair technique, so let's say you're conflicted about something or you had a tough relationship with your best friend. So we do this empty chair technique, where we imagine the other entity or individual or part of you, and we do a dialogue between them. Right. Or there are some, really powerful techniques that you have to be trained to do, and trauma work as well. That's,
it's its own
a body by its own and training by its own. There's so many different modalities that deal specifically with disorders. Like CBT is well known for depression and anxiety, for example, because evidence-based.
Now, if you were to give one piece of advice for someone or the average person to, let's say, improve, but, get them on the path, the best path forward mentally, what would it be? Like a tool?
From
journaling, seeing a therapist, I don't know, going exercising, whatever it is.
To be honest, I'd love if everybody could go see a therapist. Let's be realistic. It's not conducive financially for everyone. Nonprofit would be great if there's such an option here, but it's not. So at least journaling and meditation. They rewire your brain. And there's studies that show, psychological studies that show that meditation is for your brain what exercise is for your body, the same way. And you can still have, no matter how old you are, have the ability to build the muscle in the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, where the conscious thinking happens and critical thinking. This is where the meditative state happens. You're able to grow that muscle and rebuild it and heal it, even if you're depressed or, have had, emotional problems and things like that, just like you would build a weak muscle and strengthen it over time. But of course, you need to be persistent and you need to discipline yourself, just like you would discipline yourself and wake up at 5 a.m., which I could never do, by the way.
You know what? I don't know how to explain it to people. Look, I've always been I'm a morning person in general. So even before 6 a.m. to go to the gym has always been quite natural. Recently, let's say over the last 4 or 5 years. But yeah, this 5 a.m. I read this book by Robin Sharma called The 5 a.m. Club. Yes, highly advisable. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
And I just decided to do it. And I don't know how to explain it to people.
Changes your life?
Yeah, because I think the best analogy, and I don't know if I heard it from him or it was from a book or it was from the 5 a.m. Club book or somewhere else. But it was like, when you enter into the day naturally, even when I wake up at 6, it's constant, right? So 6 a.m., go to the gym, come back, take a shower, have breakfast, and go to work. That additional hour gives you that ability to kind of clean your brain. There's no rush. You're not, stressing about what's the next thing I have to do. Right. You can have that clarity. And I think the analogy that I heard is generally the day feels like it's piled on top of you. Right. And you're just trying to get through the day. What I found with waking up at 5 is it's rather than have it on top of me, I lay it out in front of me. And then all of a sudden I have a full perspective of the day. And then when I come to approach it, I'm not stressed. I've already accepted it, mentally checked it, mentally processed how I'm going to tackle it and done it at my own comfort, at my own speed. So by the time 8:30, 9 o'clock comes, I do not check my social media. I do not check my emails till 8:30.
That's really good.
So when I come to it, my mind is just so clean. Yeah. Right. And then when I approach it, it's just, I don't have that stress, that anxiety.
That's amazing. You've just talked about a few positive, good habits that we even suggest in therapy as part of a self-care routine. Let's not even talk about social media. This is going to be part of out there. Of course, there's positives and negatives to everything. But I remember talking one time on TV about the negative effects of social media and social media addiction and internet addiction and all of that. And a lot of people experience more depression and anxiety as their social media use goes up. It's proven by psychological studies, that we can quote. So it's, too much of a good thing is a negative, unfortunately. And some of the good tips that you're doing already is to not be the first thing you do in the morning, and it's not the last thing you do at night. You have a morning routine that gives you perspective and it organizes your day, and it sets a positive intention for the rest of the day. Like you see everything in a conscious, clear way. Whereas opposed, if I wake up at 8 and I have work at 8:30,
we don't have time
completely autopilot.
Exactly.
We're not registering. We're just doing, not
exactly.
thinking. And then we're exhausted at the end of the day. We conserve all of our energy. It's like using 10 minutes out of your phone battery, 10% on your phone battery, and it's not fully charged. You're going to be worried it's going to run out.
Exactly.
Right. So it's just charging. That's amazing that you're able to establish such a good routine.
I can't speak highly enough, more positively about it. And Laith actually got me into it. Laith does the early wake up for the runs.
Okay.
Me, I haven't been a big runner for a long time since I stopped boxing. I haven't ran. So just to get myself back to running and do the first thing as a run. That sweat in the morning, by the way, is just, I can't speak.
You know what it is? I've always been an early riser. I go to bed at 12. I'm waking up at 6 clockwork, regardless of what I'm doing. And I have to force myself on the weekends to stay in bed longer. And I started to realize might as well utilize this time more productively.
Right.
But touching back on the social media technology, now that we know that there's a direct connection between dopamine depletion using social media and phones, and I realized that I'd rather get my dopamine from working out and running rather from being glued to a screen.
Right.
And it's amazing. It's amazing. You stretch your day 20% more by having that time for yourself.
Yeah, it is an amazing transformation. And I mean, I haven't been able to wake up that early, but so our work starts later in the day, and that's why we end later in the day. Sometimes we finish at 8 p.m. Some psychologists work until 9 p.m. Luckily, I've been able to finish work at 7:30. So that means I start at 10 or 11, depending on when my clients are. So it's almost tempting to not wake up until 9, but I got into the habit actually over the COVID lockdown because there's restlessness and you can't really go out anywhere, right? I got into really positive habits of waking up between 7 and 8 a.m. It changes your entire day.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Completely. Yeah. And I'm not even waking up at 5 a.m., but I get so much done that by 10, I feel like I've accomplished so much already and I'm still in the beginning of my day.
Well, ahead of the curve.
Yeah. You're on a different, I feel I'm on a different frequency. When I'm communicating with people, that first, not even the first meeting, even by 11 or 11:30, I'm just on a different wavelength from everyone else, right? It's not to say that I'm smarter than anyone or whatever. It's just I'm buzzing.
Right. Yeah. Your energy.
It's just I'm at, whatever, peak performance and just kind of guided all the way through. And you can see people are still trying to, overcome what they just had in the last meeting and they're still trying to catch up or get their day in check. And you're it's
an amazing feeling. And I wish, everybody is able to just small little adjustments, small little tips, like going to bed at the same time every day makes a whole lot of difference. Getting up in the morning at the same routine, and then just cutting a few things out of your routine and adding a few positives. Social media for the first hour. This is what you do. Don't get into it. Don't get into your emails. It's so easy nowadays because everybody sleeps with their phone beside their, beside their bed. It's the first thing they reach out to. Right. So it's about breaking bad habits and, adopting new ones.
Do you do hypnotherapy? Is that part of, or is not?
That's not part of what I do.
Yeah.
But there are registered and licensed hypnotherapists. It's a type of therapy, but I don't do it myself.
How is it viewed in the world of therapy? Is it something you guys look down on? Some voodoo?
No.
Get that.
It's really just the power of suggestion. I'm a bit skeptical of it. I've tried it myself. It didn't work on me.
Yeah, I don't think it would work on me.
It's you have to be a good client for it, right?
Yeah.
You can't be going into you can't control me.
Just get out of here.
Yeah, especially for people that are very I tend to be sometimes a bit of a control freak. So I don't relax very easily. So that would be very hard for people to have hypnotherapy. But I imagine it works. I mean, there are studies that show it works for stopping to smoke, for weight loss. It's about changing the way you think about things. It's conditioning, right? So if I condition that smoking is disgusting, or I condition a negative thing with smoking, then your mind makes that connection, and therefore you're repulsed by the idea, or whether it's fast food or something like that. So I'm sure it works, but I don't know too much about it to judge it, to be honest. But in the field, there's some skepticism.
I like that. There it is. Skepticism, like the coaches. I'm bringing
Don't
it back.
put any words in my mouth. Some of my coach friends would hear this, and I support what you do.
So I wanted to ask you this earlier. COVID. So how has that impacted your profession? How you meet with your clients? Has it increased? Has it decreased? Are you seeing more problems out there?
So interestingly enough, this has been a common thing that myself and all the fellow friends and psychologists have often talked about since, like, we gradually went back to the offices. It's been a major change than every year. So we have kind of like seasons in therapy. We have a slow season and a busy season. Yeah. So our slow season usually starts around June, end of May, June, because the schools start to finish and the parents and the kids go out for vacations and everyone's enjoying their summer. Nobody's really thinking about their problems. So that's our slow season, June until like September. September gets really busy because back to work, back to school, all summer vacation is finished. So that's the dynamic in the Middle East, at least. I think maybe it's different somewhere else. That's what I've noticed in Kuwait and in Dubai. This year, it's been completely bizarre. I've been fully booked since I started working in May I started at a new clinic in May. I switched from my old clinic, and I've never been this busy.
Wow.
I mean, it's obviously saying something about
the environment,
the help-seeking behavior, the environment, the amount of stress that we're in. And obviously, it comes at no surprise that everybody, the WHO is calling this a mental health pandemic. Because not only is it physical, it's emotional, it's mental, the loneliness, the anxiety, the depression, suicides, all of that has increased. So yeah, it's obviously been a negative.
It's such a challenge how to deal with this. Like, you have a virus that we're learning so much on, as it's developing. But
Europe, most of the governments are going back to lockdown.
Yeah.
Yes, I heard that.
So
you have France, you have Germany going back to lockdown.
It must have a very bad impact, except for schools. I heard that schools.
They're maintaining. They're trying. See, look, they're trying to find that balance.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a tough one. Like, with my background in health policy, and it's I can imagine. Like, I do not envy the leaders of these ministries of health and all the respective governments on the decisions that they have to take, because it's a virus that you're learning, things about daily.
Right.
Yeah.
And things like, I think we were talking about it, or maybe I was talking to my wife about it, but I was saying they're just finding that it's not only centered around the lungs, it's lungs and heart and brain and
kidneys and liver.
And blood.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, every day it's evolving in terms of the information and how bad it is.
Of course.
And it's, how fortunate are you in terms of the strain, and you can get one strain and handle it well, and then you can get a different strain and it just rocks your world, right?
Right. It's definitely very challenging. And then as you talk about it in that way, it just reminds me, like, we all know that the effect of stress on immune system.
Oh, this is another element,
so it makes you susceptible to
weaker. You have a weaker foundation.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's why now, I took a step back on myself, and I was reflecting, and I was complaining about this, and it's all documented on the podcast, but I wasn't happy with where I was because I couldn't go to the gym. I wasn't being active, and I was like, I was feeling horrible, like stuck in as well. And I was feeling like just overall physically, mentally just destroyed. And then I said, you know what, like, enough of this shit, and just really try to step it up. And this is where this whole evolution has come through. Although before that I had started to kind of get a little bit more active. And it's changed. Like, we always talk about it,
So you've come out of the struggle with a positive, realization and change. It's a silver lining, really, but many people can't do that.
It's tough. No, I
Yeah.
can tell you it's tough. And to be fair, I had like the perfect environment. I'm
Right.
very fortunate
Yeah.
that I have an environment that allows me, whether
To do
it's
that.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
living
And
in
a support
space.
system is so important.
this
I
is
think right now more than ever we're realizing the importance of connections and relationships, especially for people that are, this is an expat country mostly, Dubai at least, and many people are living alone, right?
Yeah.
They fill their empty time with brunches and friends and relationships, but once that was taken away from them and they had to quarantine or be homebound, the reality sets in. Nobody spends that much time with themselves willingly,
Yeah.
and then looks into their soul and their demons, and they all come out at the wrong time,
Mhm.
right? Plus, that's just the mental health, plus the work stress and the layoffs and the financial stress, all of that.
Absolutely.
I'm going to ask you a random question.
Hmm.
Is happiness a choice?
Yes, I believe so.
I believe so too.
I believe
Yeah.
so too. as
I
well.
think it's also been studied well enough to know it's a choice.
Yeah.
Yes. There's a lot of books out there about happiness and research to show that it's not how wealthy you are. It's not how handsome you are. It's not how whatever you are. It is the way you look at things.
Mhm.
And the common denominator we just talked about is healthy quality relationships. That causes a healthy, stable well-being. And there's a Harvard study, a 75-year-old Harvard study on happiness and well-being. And they studied two different groups of people, a less fortunate group. I think it was from Boston, if I'm not mistaken. I can send you the link. And then a Harvard group of students. And they followed them through the lifespan to see how successful they were and how fortunate they were and what happened in their life. And, they measured divorce and sicknesses and illnesses and all of that. And at the end of this, and they, met with their wives and then children and all of that. And they found that the one predictor of emotional, physical health and happiness is quality relationships.
So the spouses, the family,
All of it.
It didn't
All of
matter
it,
if you
yeah.
were from a Harvard group or
Or-
from Boston
Mhm.
or you were rich or poor, but that's what happened at the end. At the end, if you feel connected and supported in a community, it goes back to the idea that we're tribal. We live in an individualistic society everywhere almost now. But we're tribal. It's our nature to want to feel connected. So if that's taken away from you and you have to be home without working from home, eating at home, not seeing friends, that's devastating.
True.
It's going against your nature.
Mm.
I mean,
I
it's
think-
necessary for sure.
I think you have that, and then I think there's just people that weren't used to being with their spouses
Yes.
so much as well.
I've seen that personally as a couples therapist. So I've had a lot more couples come in for therapy.
because they
this time.
spend so much time together, and they're just
Yes.
more.
There's a lot of distractions, right? The kids, the schools, the work, and then coming home around 5, you have dinner, and then you put the kids to sleep. You couples hardly spend time together. Now they're in each other's spaces, and it's too much. And they see a different side of how the partner operates at work.
Yeah.
Like I've seen how my husband operates at work. Thankfully, I still like him. We've been fortunate and lucky enough to not have to worry about, the kids and things like that. But other families don't have that privilege. And
Absolutely.
then their helpers walked out, and then they have 4 kids and they're all online learning. And it's quite stressful.
Yeah, it's unbelievable,
Yeah.
man. That was amazing.
It's a big topic.
We really, really enjoyed it. Like, we covered so much. Thank you for coming.
Of course.
Resha.
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate it, Layouth. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. I'm getting all
Aw,
emotional.
this is sweet.
Do you want to shout out your place, your location, your website, anything specific? We
Yeah.
can we'll put all the details, but if there's anything that you want to.
Sure. If anyone would like to come see me or have questions about just the nature of therapy, because I often respond on my website, it's reshaerheim.com. I have an Instagram page as well by the same. And I work at Wise Mind Center in Business Bay. So that's where you can book an appointment to come see me.
Amazing. If you've got issues or if you don't got issues, go see it.
I think therapy is cool.
It is. Therapy is super cool.
Definitely.
Yes, it's hip.
No, but thank you so much for
Thank
coming. Really appreciate it. As usual, subscribe, like, tell your friends, and we'll check you on
Thank
the
you.
flip side.
Pleasure.